Okay, um, we're back continuing where we left off from the IG Live on the season 2 of the Family Tree with Pleasure Peaks, and we have Antoinette here. So Antoinette, why cannabis and sexual health? Like, what what drove you to dive into that lane?
Yeah, I think, yeah, it's a great question because I know a lot of people don't think about that. A lot of
Right.
people don't think of a career in cannabis and sexual health. But for me, I can't think of anything else. I can't think of anything else worth fighting for. I can't think of anything else that I have a big enough passion for and have enough expertise and drive to fulfill this mission. I feel when it comes to cannabis, like entrepreneurs, we really do have these big missions we want to fulfill. Cannabis can change the world as a whole, whether that's healthcare as a whole, or sustainable and renewable energy, or like consciously driven companies really can come out of cannabis that is sustainable plastics. And for me specifically, it came out of fighting for patients and fighting for people's sex lives and are often disregarded as worthless. I think what I've learned working with so many patients that are chronic pain patients, because that is the biggest demographic that uses cannabis. There was just so many sexual health ailments that weren't being taken care of. If you have endometriosis or dyspareunia or pain during intercourse, especially if you're a woman or seen as one, you're usually told like, oh, just have a glass of wine, or, like, it's fine, like, suck it up, everybody goes through it, and I find that the research shows, and as a woman, speaking of these issues, even from a woman, you're like, oh yeah, like, of course those things we hear, but for me, it's so painful to hear. It's heartbreaking actually to hear that there's so many people in pain suffering, even in first world countries. Even people who have access to doctors still can't get the attention and medicine they deserve. And I think that that's worth fighting for and worth addressing and worth talking about. And that's why I love what I do, because we are finding that there's so many amazing natural alternatives, including cannabis. And I think that's such a great conversation to have, because we need to know all of our options so we can make the best educated choices for ourselves.
Mhm.
And I love being a part of that solution. And I think that a lot of cannabis entrepreneurs can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that you raise a lot of very important points. And I think you're in a great space, just being where you're in Canada. So I think the fact that you started this company in Canada it's bolted over a lot better if you would have started it here in the States. So how how has that impacted your company? Do you feel just the fact that you guys are much more advanced with the stance on cannabis than we are here in the States? Is federally legal there. You guys have access to research. You guys have access to a lot more things that we're still fighting for here in the States.
No, yeah, I think that's such a great question. Like, is it great that that we were established in Canada first? Because funny enough, we actually launched in the US first.
Okay.
Um, but we are a Canadian based company. So it's so funny because it's such a mess. And that's the mess of drug policy. And that's the mess of racism getting involved where it has no business being involved with, which is medicine and pharma. Right. And I think it goes back so long that I could talk about this for literally hours. But in Canada, I think I'm so lucky and fortunate, yes, to have been started in the Canadian cannabis industry, because we've had a long standing Canadian cannabis industry. We have a long-standing legacy market. Cannabis has been legal for over 25 years for medical purposes. But the really cool and fascinating thing is that like even 5 years ago, like 85% of doctors didn't know that there was even a medical cannabis regime. Like how insane is that? So the fact that we did have medical cannabis, but doctors didn't know about it. And if doctors were to use that old existing medical marijuana act that we had, they would have been forced to investigations predominantly. And I find that that is, yet again, just deeply rooted in so many disgusting things that have no reasons being there, which made opportunities for entrepreneurs really difficult to establish their businesses legally. And that's the mess that is the drug policy. But as being a person of color and having my grandfather, who's a Rastafarian, deported from Canada for pot, I find it really interesting that I'm in this industry today. And I think that's why I've always gone to like being overly compliant, overly policing myself to make sure that I am not putting myself at risk. Because even just work there is a high risk thing for any person, but specifically a person of color. And I find that that is still true today. But there are ways around it, which is about understanding, the laws and what's best for the company and yourself. And for that being said, that's why we launched in the US first, because as soon as cannabis was legalized for recreational use, creating opportunity for entrepreneurs, it was already monopolized. It was already monopolized by ex-political insiders, ex-pharma, and ex-police chiefs, right? So it's like, that's obviously what's going to happen. So there wasn't really space for small entrepreneurs like myself. So that's why we launched in the States, and we've been having great success there. But now, since, it's a few years now since legalization, there are a lot more opportunities for entrepreneurs, which I think is a really exciting time. So which is why we're coming back home to Canada and launching, hopefully by the end of this year, 2021, which is really exciting.
Awesome.
Suppositories. So I think that's why I love teaching people and educating mentors and my mentees through my Green Rush program, teaching people how to have a compliant legal cannabis business, because so many people think, they're just making their own edibles at home and this is a legal business. There are ways to get licensing, there are ways to get partnerships for everyone and anyone. And I think it's just about knowing, yet again, all of your options. And I've been doing this for so long that I've learned so much along the way. And, but I think that going back to the question, like Canada versus US, where are you going to get your business now? It's so unique to whatever you're trying to do. But I feel that in terms of a medical cannabis company like Pleasure Peaks, really wanting to push forward medical cannabis advancements, Canada is a great place because we have one of the highest standards of cannabis. Our production sites here look like spaceships. It's insane. You will never find a speck of germ in these places with the insane amount of regulations that were put on the cannabis industry because it was never supposed to really thrive. So it's really interesting to see what we're doing. And I think we have the top rated cannabis and we have amazing pharma in cannabis now that can work with the legacy market. So I believe that with our import and export license that we already have, we will be the leaders in global medicine in terms of cannabis, which I think is an incredible opportunity because it's been around here for a really long time. But yeah, it's just the start of this industry. It's so crazy to think about me working in this industry 5, maybe 8 years ago. I didn't think I would see legalization in my lifetime. So it's moving really quickly, which is such a joy to see.
Yeah, I mean, you're an OG in the game. I remember when I ran across you and you were saying that, you've been in the game, 8, 9 years. I was like, oh, okay. So I immediately knew that I would be able to learn a lot from you. With me just getting into cannabis, about 3, 4 years ago. So you said something that segues me into my next question and topic. It is such a new industry and is very much so in its infancy. And I think by the year, I think what were they saying, 2030, it's been a new article circulating around the industry. By the year 2030, the industry is going to balloon to 100 billion, in generated revenue a year, which is insane. But even more insanely um, than that, only 2% of people of color, are entrepreneurs and CEOs in the space. And so with with the growth of it, the people that are the ex-pharma and ex-police chiefs who are in the industry and kind of dominating, monopolizing it, we need to do our due diligence and band together and help more of us get into the industry. And I was a panelist on a webinar you put together, the Cannabis Built by Blacks Expo, and I thought that you did a really amazing job putting that together. So, what is the importance, or what would you say to people of color looking to get into industry? What would you implore them to do?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's not a bigger size of people of color in the cannabis industry today, because I think we have so much to offer in a different set of lens and eyes and products. Hello. Like, of course. So I think they have a huge space in it. What I love is like, I loved putting together the Cannabis Built by Blacks Expo, which was a virtual conference. We had over 700 people show up. It was amazing. It had over 40 Black cannabis speakers from around the world talking about cannabis. It was really important that we all gathered, connected, learned, and grew together from our viewpoint, globally. What I love to do is show people what opportunities exist in cannabis, and for people to, I like to guide them to their passions within the aspect. So, I feel that everyone can find something that they love and like a career they can thrive in and feel fulfilled in cannabis. I truly do. Everyone, and I think there's so many different points of this industry. It goes through technology, it goes through agriculture, right? It goes through business, it goes to, social, it goes through so many different entertainment. So I think that cannabis is wonderful, and there's so much work that needs to be done there, specifically around the destigmatization, right? I think that people think cannabis is something it's so far from the devil's lettuce, right? It's actually like the Garden of Eden. And I think it's important that we, shift the language on that. And I think we can be a huge part of that. But I'm not really one to tell people exactly what to do. I think it's, such a soul seeking thing and journey you can have within the cannabis industry. And I think that's so fascinating, because like, what other industry really does that for you, right? But there's so much to it. And I just think that there's so much power within it, because it goes back to changing the world as a whole. And I think we all know the world is in due time to change everything. This world that we're living in isn't working like at all. And I think cannabis is the answer to so many of them, if not all,
Yeah.
which is so wild to think about. But yeah, in terms of like helping the environment and going into sustainable plastics and resources, and then going into healthcare. And it's also a natural food. So I think that there's so much that can come from it. And I'm really excited to be a part of that solution, which is why I love the Green Rush program. So if you find that you are a student that's really passionate about cannabis and tech, I can connect you with the guys like at GPen that have been doing like cannabis technologies for years that can mentor you. in your startup. If you think of like the next cannabis and cancer product, and you really want to think of it, or whatever it is that you've personally been using for your ailments, I can connect you with pharma teams that I've worked with in cannabis that know how to bring those drugs to market. Or if you want to become the next cannabis influencer, we can, connect those people to you and craft a really important message that can help change the world. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to be a part of. And I love that aspect of the Green Rush program because it's for everyone. And we just have over 200 mentors all around the world who work in cannabis that can help and support you, because so many entrepreneurs are solopreneurs and are doing it themselves, and this is why they're not lasting. So we give them tons of resources like mentorship and funding and education, of course.
Yeah, definitely. This is like, you know, nobody can do like anything on their own. I think, a lot of people need to understand that, the power of a team. I wouldn't be, nowhere half as far as where we are with 448 without the team around me. So I think that's very important, selecting the people that you want, to help you further your mission. But you're right, there is an industry within, cannabis, like there for every industry that is outside of cannabis, there's a lane in cannabis for that. So I think you really hit the nail on the head when you said it's kind of like a soul seeking thing. What do you want to do? Like, I think you have to be in cannabis for the right reasons, in order to succeed. I don't think unless you just have piles and piles of capital, you're not going to succeed in cannabis if your heart is not in it. So I think you need to find out where your passion lies. And like you said, your Green Rush program, I think is, a great program for anybody who's looking to get into the industry. So feel free to tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and like going back to what you said, like we also heavily go into education on the plant because it's not just about your passion, it's also about learning what cannabis really is today. Cannabis is a lot more than just cannabis and weed butter and brownies and vape pens, right?
Oh,
Cannabis cannabis is now like so many crazy things which are really excited. I've seen cannabis toothpicks. I saw this guy give me a cannabis toothpick, and I was like, "Why are you giving me a cannabis toothpick? This is like so dumb." And he's like, "Oh, really? You think so?" And I was like, "Yeah. Like, what could you possibly be using this for?" And he's like, "I'm selling it to hospitals because elderly have a really hard time swallowing their pills, so they need to salivate more. So they put the THC toothpick, and they start salivating a lot more." And it's like, wow. That's incredible, right? So I think that there's so many cool applications that cannabis has that are so wonderful and unique, right? So obviously, me focusing in cannabis and sexual health, not many people think of that, but it's what I thought of, right? And there's just so much to it. So what we love to share with people in the Green Rush program is also all of the different applications that cannabis has, right? What it could be used for. And then once they find out what it could be used for, they can apply it to their own industry. That's usually how it works out, right? Like for one example, one of our students is an amazing DJ. She's a DJ in LA. She, she flies everywhere globally, and she wants to get into cannabis because she loves it and she uses it for her personal anxiety. But on top of that, when she learned throughout her program, is that cannabis is also a great neuroprotectant. CBD specifically is an amazing neuroprotectant, and you can feel that anytime you have a hangover and you put a CBD topical on your forehead, your hangover is like gone within like 5 minutes. It's the best hangover cure I've ever found. And you would know that through learning different applications, right? And then tying it to your niche. And that's what I love about the Green Rush program is that we really go into the applications of cannabis because they're really endless. It's really like the best superfood I've ever found.
yeah, agreed. Roz, do you have anything you want to go ahead and start asking some of your questions?
Yeah, I do. So I wrote them down because I knew I was going to. Your I guess, customer base, do you find that it's more, all right, let me backtrack a little bit. So I always hear like, people say like, oh, I like to smoke and then, be intimate with my partner. It's, high sex is better, or, for a lot of, it seems like a lot of people. Do you feel like your customer base starts more off of like, want to get that like pleasure feeling, or is it more coming from like, I need like help because I'm hurt?
That's such a good question. Thank you so much for that. And I think the company started from pain, but it got to pleasure, right? And that's what we're all about, getting from pain to pleasure. But some people don't even have pain, but they can still get all of the pleasure, right? So is our demographic more towards patients? You know what? We have so many cool demographics. I'm always learning of new demographics from you all that send me like messages and emails about loving our products. One of the coolest recent things that I don't even know how I didn't think of it, but there's a demographic of partners that have a person in the relationship that has a huge penis, right? And if a person in the relationship has a huge penis, the other partner has to really deal with that all, right? So we have actually a huge demographic of people with petite vaginas that use our suppositories because it helps mitigate the pain. So it makes it more pleasurable. So they still get to have those really hard fucking experiences, but still with a huge cock. So we're always learning. I loved learning last year that a huge percentage of our market was the LGBTQ community, especially amongst anal sex amongst men. So I think that's wonderful. But it's crazy. It did come from one woman having endometriosis. That's where it all came from. But now it's also going into women who have never squirted for the first time, or women who have or who don't feel comfortable masturbating as well, feel a lot more comfortable with our CBD lubricant as well. So I think those are all wonderful experiences. I find that, another demographic are people who want to get off of toys, especially the vulva carriers. So they love to use the CBD lubricant because it makes it a lot more easier to obtain orgasm and squirting with these lubricants. So they're great tools, but they're for everyone. And that's why I love our slogan, like pleasure is your birthright, all genders, all races, fuck the
Great way to put that.
pink product, whatever's, we all use these products together in a lot of different holes, and they're safe and incredibly effective. The coolest thing about CBD and how it works on genitals is it acts like a vasodilator. It's the same way how like Viagra works. Viagra is a type of vasodilator. So if we can use those effects topically, especially on a vulva, it creates very much the same effect. Like a female Viagra is cannabis lubricants because it increases a ton of blood flow to the area and creates a lot more arousal, a lot more sensitivity to touch, right? So this is the perfect concoction for multiple orgasms and squirting and relaxing of the pelvic muscles, and it's just all juiciness with this amazing lubricant. So cannabis has so much to offer. It's so beautiful. And orgasms is just one, I guess.
Sounds like I'm getting people stocking stuffers.
I'm gonna jump in real quick, Roz. Ask this question, and then I'll let you have it. So, what is the difference between Pleasure Peaks product and say a KY jelly?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason why I created Pleasure Peaks was because when I was first studying endometriosis for these patients, the first time I heard of it, I was also realizing that the traditional sexual health like lubricant market isn't really regulated. A lot of them have really harmful ingredients that can really upset the pH balance of a woman's vagina. So that can create lots of issues like BV, UTIs, yeast infections. So those are like, I can't believe that we're putting products on the market that could give that to us because we want scents or because we want, very tasty flavors or sugary flavors like strawberry. So I find that these aren't really consciously formulated. They're great and stable on the shelf, and they'll never like mold and expire, but they're not the best suitable for that specific genital. What's the difference between like, it's great that it can go on the shelf because men can use it relatively safe, no problem, because you guys don't have that mucosa, high mucosa vulva, right? So a little bit just gets so absorbed there. It's so important that we're really thoughtful about the ingredients in these products. So the difference between Pleasure Peaks products and the traditional ones on the market is that we're formulated by pharmacists the whole way from the US and Canada, and we will always be, which is why we don't use full spectrum hemp. We use CBD isolate. We do these things because they're from a pharmacist background, and that's because that's where we're coming from, right? Full spectrum is amazing. You get extra terpenes, you get maybe even a little bit of THC. But when we're looking into really gathering data on what's specifically working, we know that we can control CBD. We know that we can control what we're using at what dosage specifically every single time and know what we're getting back. So I think that, you know, we are a little bit different than most traditional sexual health cannabis companies, but that's what you'll get with us is the best pharmaceutical grade cannabis products when it comes to sexual health. We took out all of the dyes and scents out of our products because we don't think that they're necessary at all, right? But we have added, instead of dyes and stuff like that, we have added aphrodisiac essential oils right into our bath salts for specifically. So, you know, sometimes people want to have sexual and intimate experiences, but sometimes they have like a pain body is what I call it. Sometimes, you know, when stress can get so heavy that you could physically feel it in the body and you just don't have that flow and movement to really be intimate. That's when I love using our CBD bath salts. And our bath salts have rose petals in them as well to get you in the mood, as well as rose essential oils. So it really helps play into that intimate experience. So you're always going to have that type of experience with their products.
Awesome.
Yeah.
To kind of take it into education on this, when you talk to your pharmacist, do you often find that they're educating, you know, other doctors that might be someone's PCP, or like when they talk to, you know, the patients during the data collection process, do they say like have these conversations with your PCP and try to like educate them on certain information that they're getting about their body? Kind of that aspect.
So our approach to getting out in the medical field is we work with the Endometriosis Society of America, and we work with the Endometriosis Foundation of Canada. So we have regular meetings with thousands of doctors nationally, actually on cannabis and other ailments specifically, which I'm so happy we have that, because that was not a conversation years ago, but now we get to speak to a bunch of doctors. We're not speaking directly to doctors, but to be HIPAA compliant in some states, we do have connections with their personal doctors and our doctors, depending on what state they're in. But yeah, it's really our own internal doctors that are doing the bulk work of it all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you've learned anything, is that I definitely have the best quality. So we definitely have the best doctors that we work with. I'm super proud of all of their achievements and everything they're doing with us. And yeah, they speak, and I speak at a lot of the conferences and expos. So you'll see a lot of us with our Pleasure Peaks products, and you can always come up and ask some questions.
That's good to know. I also, so in regards to that as well, damn it, just off my head. Let me get the paper up. So, and folks wanting to kind of get further into knowing about these products, and then also knowing about how to approach like this medically and educationally, what are where can they find these resources that you offer? You know, other than like, is there anything other than your website or some socials, maybe like the endometriosis?
Yeah,
Got
Endometriosis.
it. And
Yeah.
then it's like, is there a website or something that they can check out and they get direct like information from that? Or
Most definitely. So you can check out pleasurepeaks.com and there's a plethora of resources. We have our products, we have our podcast, which is filled with tons of stories from our members who get to share their own cannabis and sexual health stories. So you can hear from literal patients, real stories who have fibroids or endometriosis, because we can't say that these are effective yet. We can't make those claims, but we can share these amazing stories that are happening all around the world. So you can listen for yourself, and they cover so many different topics, from multiple orgasms to no touch orgasms with cannabis. So it's a really great podcast. On top of the podcast and products, we have the events. So we have virtual events every single month, from sex education. We also have monthly events for assault survivors. And our events are always changing. And I think we have a cannabis and chair striptease class coming up. So always really fun things to make people get into their most erotic selves and feel worthy of pleasure. I feel like that is like my mission, to continuously tell people. And yes, we do have a blog if you want to read up on anything, on specific ailments and stories that we've done.
that's awesome. And ironically, I was actually having a conversation about this earlier. I was looking on your website and I was kind of going through the products, and I came across the yoni egg, and I was on the phone with someone. They were like, "Oh my God, I've wanted one of those for so long." And we got into the conversation about like what it does and how it helps, heal and empower you. So just being able to sit down and talk with you and understand, a better a way to think about it, because I never really thought about this before either, but other than like the high sex is good, what I mean? So I really want to thank you for this, and it's been very educational and helpful to understand. So now I can actually go and have these conversations again, and I'm like, yo, I got this good website for you to check out.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so cool. People love yoni eggs. Yoni eggs are so fascinating to me. I love them before Gwyneth Paltrow loved them and made them like all crazy. But I think yoni eggs is like an ancient traditional Chinese medicine that they would use for the royal family and staying youthful and revitalized within the vagina.
Mhm.
And it's so crazy the feeling you get with them, but it's like an emotional experience, and it's also a very physical experience. These crystals have such strong energies, and the womb is such a high energetic space, so it's really fascinating what comes up within those experiences. And that also kind of bleeds into tantra, which we go into a lot about. And we have tantra cannabis couple retreats, right? So we have these pleasure places that you can get away for a week with us in Hawaii and Jamaica to get deeper into
Wow.
the erotic self. So I love tantra. So like cannabis and sex is actually nothing new. Cannabis and sex was used in ancient India in tantra for thousands of years, which I think is so cool. And tantra is like a yoga where it's a practice and a philosophy, and it's truly just learning how to like be love in every aspect. And it's such a beautiful experience that I think the Western world can learn so much about.
Always behind the curve on some things.
Yeah, exactly.
Things. Damn everything. I was trying to explain, what a yoni egg is and what it does, because I was trying to do the best job as I can as a man to explain it to somebody, a woman that I know that she had never heard of it.
Oh, I love yoni eggs. So yoni eggs are crystal eggs. So crystals like rose quartz or black obsidian or jade are the most common one. And jade is the original one, the OG, the one that they would use thousands of years ago. And they would use it because they say jade is really connected with the kidneys, where in TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, that's really where like your erotic energy comes from. Which I think is so fascinating in itself. But when using these crystal eggs, you can get them drilled or non-drilled. And they come drilled with holes because sometimes you want to put a string around it so you can pull it out, kind of like on a tampon there's a string to pull it out, right? But some, you know, don't want the hole, so they can just, you can get it without it. But this crystal egg could be inserted up the vagina, and it's used to really have your, like, it's really used to activate your libido. So what I've found is that even women who are like postmenopausal have gotten their periods, which is crazy, especially when using the jade egg, because the jade egg is very strong. Um, but within that aspect, people are using other stones like rose quartz. And rose quartz is a crystal that's connected with the heart chakra. So it's known to give you a lot more self-love and accepting love into your life. And, you know, the vagina being such an intimate area, we carry a lot of like trauma and pain within that womb space. And these crystal eggs could really help us connect with those energies for healing and sexual healing, which I think is a whole other layer of healthcare we don't talk about. And we also give the black obsidian rose quartz, and the black obsidian rose quartz is known to really is known to get rid of trauma, to expel trauma from the body. And that's our black obsidian. So that one we love to give for assault survivors wanting to really feel into that pain. And I think these things are so great. I've used them. I've found such amazing experiences with them. And I think this just goes back
Sorry to
to,
cut you off, Antoinette. We have about 30 seconds, so just wrap up any, final thoughts or, anything you want people to, know about sexual health or pleasure peaks.
okay. Yeah, and if you want to reach out to me, feel free to find us at pleasurepeaks.com or AntoinetteGomez.com. Check out our events, our retreats, and if you want to check out the Green Rush program, you can find that at AntoinetteGomez.com.